Hello there, it's a new day. We're grateful for it. Hello and welcome. We're coming to you live from our studios here in Kukumlemle on digital address GA09925339. Our top stories this hour. President Akufo-Addo delivers his fourth and final State of the Nation's address to the 7th Parliament, touting what he says are significant successes achieved by his administration over the last 4 years. As president, we have a full account of the address, including his take on dispute over the 2020 election. Well, you also hear the minority, which says the president missed the opportunity to address the bloodshed on election day. We'll be staying more on the State of the Nation address as we scrutinize the benefits of government planting for food and jobs policy as touted by President Akufo-Addo. And the Ghana Circuit Court has adjourned for the 6th time the case of alleged shooting by a national security operative at the Ablekuma Central Coalition Center during the just ended general election. We have details of it for you. The pause is brought to you by Global Communities, Lu, Affordable Safe Sanitation. Do join us on DSTV 421, GoTV 144. We're streaming live also on YouTube and on our social media handles. Your WhatsApp messages are welcome, 0540109009. My name is Gifty Ando Apia, and this is The Pulse. Please be my guest. Now, the Supreme Court has, in a unanimous decision, ruled that the whole High Court erred when it granted an injunction against the gazetting of John Peter Amewu as Hohoe MP-elect. The court said the case filed by the Sal resident requested some reliefs that can only be granted through an election petition and not a human rights issue as has been filed. It therefore set aside the portions of the case at the High Court that is requesting reliefs relating to election of Amewu as MP for Hohoe. Court correspondent Joseph Akable is joining me with more. Hello, Joseph.
3.
So, Joseph, let's begin with what the court, the reasons given by the court for the decision taken, apart from the ones we've already stated.
And so the court made a point that the issues about whether or not the people's rights were breached when the Electoral Commission organized the elections at the Hohoe constituency without their inclusion are not matters that affect the validity of John Peter Amewu as a Hohoe MP. It says that he in no way did not prevent anyone from voting that particular election. He simply put himself up and was duly elected. And so if there are any concerns relating to his election, the appropriate forum is certainly the High Court, but it should be going by way of a petition instead of filing an action in the form of a human rights action seeking to seek reliefs that are of the nature of an election petition. And so the court said that the High Court judge erred when he granted that particular injunction, but it will not set the injunction aside because the injunction as it stands has elapsed. It was to last for 10 days and it elapsed about 3 days ago. And so there's no injunction to set aside, even though it establishes that indeed the judge was wrong in granting that injunction. The court now picked the case that has been filed at the whole court and set aside all aspects of the case that are asking for reliefs relating to the validity of the election of John Peter Amewu as the Hohoe MP. And so all those aspects of the case were set aside.
Well, Joseph, you've also been getting some reactions on the back of this court case. Tell us.
So I spoke to the Deputy Attorney General Godfrey Deboadami. He says the decision is in the right direction, but I also put the question to him about, justice has been served, but what happens to the residents of Sal, because they also deserve representation. We can take a listen to him speak to us about the decision and address the concerns relating to what should happen to the residents of Sal.
Indeed, we are very grateful to the court. We're happy that justice has been served. Right from the outset, our contention was that the action filed at the High Court, who was incompetent, was totally out of order because you cannot seek election petition reliefs in a human rights action. And today, the court has held to the same effect, that was unjustified for them to have commenced an election petition and characterize him as a human rights action. So we're very grateful. And I think that it's also important for me to place on record certain misconceptions and misperceptions that have been made about the intervention of the Attorney General in this matter. And that is clearly because the Attorney General was sued. The Attorney General was a party to the High Court proceedings at whole. And if you are party to proceedings, you reserve the right to take any action at all that you think is available to you at law. And that is what the Attorney General did. We commence an action here at the Supreme Court seeking to quash what went on at the High Court rule because it was not according to law and it was granted by the court. Well, so our contention was that the matter was in the nature of a parliamentary election petition, and to that extent, the orders of the court dated 23rd December ought to be struck out. The court granted an order of certiorari quashing the entire proceedings of the court on 23rd December 2020. So we satisfied wholly with that one. Then the second relief for prohibition, the court granted same to the extent that it struck out the reliefs that were in the nature of an election petition sought against John Peter Amewu to restrain him from being gazetted, to restrain him from being put before Parliament for swearing in and all. That have been totally struck out by the court. And that's essentially what we thought would be justice in the circumstances. So we are happy and very much satisfied with the orders made by the court today.
What happens to the people of Buem? What happens to the people of Buem who equally deserve justice?
Indicated. I think that the Buem issue, for me, is a simple and straightforward one. The court today has upheld the validity of CI 128. The court had indicated that clearly CI 128 was constitutional, and the interested parties led by Tashikata had failed to produce any evidence whatsoever impeaching the validity of CI 128. So, as far as I'm concerned, to the extent that CI 128 had placed the people of Central Kofi, Akpafu, Likpe, and Lolobi under Buem, it resolves the issue. I think the consequence to all of this is that the Buem election, if you ask me, yes, for me, was improperly conducted to the extent that it excluded the people of Central Kofi, Akpafu, Lolobi, and Likpe. So I think that the proper thing to do is for the Electoral Commission to perhaps look at that issue and take due steps that will warrant a conduct of the Buem election again. That's the most important thing. Of course, I'm also aware of the pendency of a suit filed by certain people seeking to have the Buem election annulled and for a fresh election to be conducted. I think that issue will be dealt with by the High Court. And indeed, the court today, when it was preserving the part relating to human rights to be continued at the High Court too, clearly also is thinking on the same line. So that issue can be resolved by the High Court who, and the conclusion can be that the Buem election should be conducted again. Because the court has indicated today clearly that the people of the 4 areas in question cannot be part of Hohoi. They are not part of Hohoi as per law, because to do so will be an infringement on Article 47, Clause 2 of the Constitution.
Well, that's Godfred Yeboah-Dame, the Deputy Attorney General, speaking to other journalists and my colleague who is also on Zoom with me. Joseph, so the point he makes is that, well, the High Court can deal with the issue of human rights, but they certainly are excited. What does the future hold for this group of people? I mean, the Sao enclave.
So as it stands, I mean, they do not have an MP in terms of how Parliament is composed and how it will look on January 7th. But what remains is they have a human rights action that is pending at the whole High Court, and so they can pursue that action and ask for the necessary relief to be granted, and including possibly asking that they be allowed to vote in the constituency where they are eligible to vote in. And that is what the AG says. He doesn't think it's the Hohoi constituency, but rather in the Buem constituency. And so they can still go through the direction of the human rights issue at the whole High Court. And in terms of Mr. Amewu's own election, it means that nothing stops him from taking his seat in Parliament on January 7th, giving the NPP the 137 seats that they've always said they actually have.
They saw enclave, people who, in this particular case, were they represented by legal counsel in court, and what did they say? What was their reaction?
Mr. Tachikata represented them. He declined to grant us an interview. The only response he gave to the panel, in fact, after the decision had been rendered, ordinarily they are expected to stand up and acknowledge the decision. He didn't stand up until he was prompted by Justice Yapo, who was the presiding judge, who said to him that, Mr. Chikata, you are our lecturer, but the court has ruled. Then he just said that as the court pleases, then he resumed his seat again. When he came out, we tried to speak to him. He declined to grant us an interview.
And give us a mental picture of what the court looked like today. Were they people from this area who, came to check out what was happening with their case, or was it just about the representatives, the legal counsels that they had? It looks like I've lost Joseph there. I wanted him to take us a bit more into the courtroom. But while we're still staying on the courts, the Accra Circuit Court 4 has adjourned for the 6th time the case of an alleged shooting by a national security operative at the Abdulkuma Central Coalition Center during the just ended general elections. It has been adjourned to Monday, January 11, 2021. Now, the court last week adjourned proceedings to today as a result of the Circuit Court Judge Emmanuel Sando's inability to show up due to ill health. Now, the judge was unable to attend today too for the same reason. My colleague Kweku Asante was in court today. He has joined me on Zoom with more. Kweku, this is the second time that the said judge is said to have been sick. With this particular adjournment, what next?
Actually, also be the 6th time that this case has been adjourned in court. So last week when it was adjourned, it was expected that today the case will be heard and the case will proceed further. But the court officials' information that they gave out was that the judge was still not feeling fine, and so he is unable to come to court and as it were, let the case proceed. So what is going to happen next is that the court has officially written to the Chief Justice to get them a new judge, a new court to come and hear this case up until the time where this judge will feel fine and come back to work and then take back the case and continue. And so it's expected that the Chief Justice will act on this request from the Accra Circuit Court 4 before Monday, which is actually the next adjourned date. So the court officials have adjourned the case to 11th January 2021, expecting that by then the Chief Justice would have assigned the case to a new court to continue hearing the case.
What about the suspect? Was he in court today?
The understanding I got was that that information that the judge was sick and was not going to be in court today was passed on to the prosecution. And so the prosecution was not in court, neither did they bring with them the accused person. In previous cases, in previous times when the case has been adjourned, like I said, this will be the 6th time the case has been adjourned. Of all those times, it was brought to court together with the prosecution. Normally, he would come having bowed his head and all that. But today, he was not brought at all. The police prosecution was not in court. So as soon as the case was called, the court officials relayed that information to the court and then said that the case had been adjourned to January 11, 2021.
So it looks like an out no-show in court. So the judge was not in court, the suspect was not in court, and it looks like from what you're saying, the prosecution wasn't in court as well. So give us a mental picture how it looked like. Who was there?
All right. So since this case commenced, it hasn't made much progress because the first time it was called on 17 December. The prosecution just read out the charges. The accused person said that he was not guilty of any of the charges that had been leveled against him, and so he was remanded into police custody to reappear the following week so that the case will proceed. But the next time, the judge adjourned the case again, and then at the next adjourned date was adjourned again, and so we've not had much progress. And so in court today was a little bit of a show. When the judge was not there, the accused person was not there with his lawyers, obviously, and the prosecution also was not there. And so they just had to read out the information to the court and people who have gathered. Of course, we saw some people there who have various interests. The specific journalist at the center of this case who was shot, his editor, has almost always been frequenting the court, trying to follow up and get justice for his staff member. And so most of them were surprised at the turn of events because this should be the 2nd time the trial judge has fallen sick, and so the case is not going to proceed. And it's also the 6th time in total that the case has been adjourned. So slowly, people are beginning to think that the wheels of justice is really grinding slowly in this matter, and they are expecting that the Chief Justice will expedite action on the specific action and then get a new judge to hear the case.
Kweku, thank you very much. Kweku Asante was in court for us over the alleged shooting involving someone whose lawyer revealed his detail to be a national security operative who was at the Coalition Center and apparently fired a shot which resulted in the injury of a journalist. Now, President Akufo-Addo has delivered his fourth and final State of the Nation's address to the 7th Parliament, in which he says there's been a significant transformation of the Ghanaian economy in the last 4 years, despite some difficulties. In an address that lasted less than half an hour, the president touched on the economy, agriculture, the peace accord in Dagbang, the fight against COVID-19, and the 2020 presidential and parliamentary elections held last month. Highlights.
Speaker, the next parliament is not going to be anything like this one that ends today. I do not suggest that the House might not be as busy, but the sitting arrangements, the source and decibel levels of sound from the House would certainly be different. The good people of Ghana have spoken and given Parliament an almost equal strength on both sides of the House. We have no choice but to work with the consequences of the desires of the people. The House would have to be more accommodating of each other's views and probably devise new ways of conducting its affairs in the interest of the good governance of our people. I am thankful to the Ghanaian people and to the Almighty that I have been given a clear mandate to govern the country for 4 more years, and thereby given the opportunity to complete tasks, consolidate some of the far-reaching measures we have introduced, and initiate further changes and adjustments to policies and practices. The Constitution demands that we go to the people after 4 years to ask for a mandate, and we must listen to the voice of the people. I said during the election campaign, and it is my firm and passionate view, that I should only be president in a fairly conducted election, which I believe in all sincerity the election of 7th December was. I recognize that my main opponent in the election, the former President John Dramani Mahama, has gone to the Supreme Court to seek its intervention and grant reliefs that he believes were compromised in the conduct of the elections. It is good for the nation that in the end he chose the legal path, instead of the pockets of violence that have attended the rejection of the results by his party in the period after the elections. We all have to make a deliberate decision to invest in the rule of law and uphold the integrity of the institutions of our state, so that no person or group of persons take the law into their own hands with impunity. Mr. Speaker, it has been my great pleasure and exceptional privilege these 4 years to have served as president of our beloved country. I'm grateful to you, this honorable House, for its cooperation in the enterprise to attain our common goal and aspiration of advancing the peace, progress, and welfare of the Ghanaian people.
Well, he didn't go without touching on the banking sector. He said the banking sector cleanup had cost the country 21 billion Ghana cedis, but for good reasons.
Probably the most difficult problem the government met on coming into office was the state of the banking and financial sector. Many of our banks were in distress and had been kept on unsustainable and artificial life support by the central bank. The supervisory agencies were unfortunately not performing their duties, and the governance and management structures of many of the banks were clearly not adequate. If truth be told, many of our finance houses were running what can only be called glorified Ponzi schemes, and had lured many depositors into these schemes. We were in a desperate situation, and urgent radical measures had to be taken to prevent the collapse of the entire financial and banking sector. The Bank of Ghana, under new leadership, intervened and has restored sanity to the sector And in the process, we have saved the banks involved and 4.6 million depositors' funds. The government has had to find some 21 billion cedis to fund the cleaning up exercise. This exercise has enabled a more robust financial and banking services sector to emerge, the better to finance the rapid development of our nation. Speaker, there are painful lessons that we all have to imbibe from this debacle. There is no question but that many people got attracted to the unsustainable high interest rates that some of these financial houses were offering. In all financial dealings, we have to accept what the experts tell us, that whenever whatever on offer sounds too good to be true, it invariably ends up being untrue and unsustainable. Government is committed to paying all validated claims, and I expect the process to be completed soon after the courts grant the liquidation orders for the remaining failed fund management companies.
Well, how about the food on your table? On agriculture, President Akufo-Addo said there's abundance of food in the Ghanaian market due to what he says are the sound agricultural policies that he introduced.
In 2017, it appeared to some like the same old refrain when we said farmers and agriculture would get the highest priority. But we can see the difference it makes when a government treats farmers with respect and spends resources and expertise on agriculture. We have seen the dramatic turnaround of our agricultural fortunes due to the progressive policies that have improved the living standards of farmers in the country. The excellently executed policy for planting for food and jobs has laid the foundation for the agricultural transformation of our country. We are able to say that our country is now a net exporter of food, and we no longer have to import basic foods like plantain and tomatoes. Mr. Speaker, Ghana rice is the preferred choice in an increasing number of our homes as the growing, processing, and packaging of rice become a more established and attractive industry. During this COVID crisis, we have mercifully been spared the specter of food shortages. On the contrary, thanks to planting for food and jobs, food has been in abundance in our markets across the country. Throughout the ages, food processing has provided the takeoff point for the industrialization of many nations. And we are taking that lesson to heart as we pursue the goal to industrialize, modernize, and create jobs for the young people of our nation. The One District, One Factory program is part of the anchor on which we are building the comprehensive industrialization of our country. Much of the work has now been done to put in place the framework for the rapid implementation of projects. The factors that are currently in place and in production reflect the underlying principle of the program, which is the equitable distribution of development projects around the country. The prospects of our becoming the automobile hub in West Africa are growing stronger every day, with the investments being made in the country by global manufacturing giants in the automobile industry.
So that's President Akufo-Addo's perspective largely on agriculture as far as the state of the nation is. Let's get on the phone now and find out what the thoughts of the General Agriculture Workers Union is. I have the General Secretary, Edward Karwe, joining us. Thank you very much, sir, for your time. Good afternoon.
Yeah, good afternoon.
So I believe you listened to the president. I mean, today his speech wasn't so long. He focused it pretty well on agriculture. What are your initial remarks?
Well, let me say that, as you did indicate, it has been a brief state of the nation address, and then that is good for all of us because it makes all of us to know exactly what the president has said, so we are not lost in it. Agriculture under the period has had a mixed, fortunes, in the sense that if you take some particular crops, we had good harvest.
Okay.
And as to whether that good harvest was mainly as a result of government policies is something that is left to us to look at. But when agriculture does well and you are unable to market or get your produce taken up at the farm gate, then it even leads to greater pain for the farmer than if the farmer had not at all been able to produce. I think we have not been able as a country within the period to ensure that every grain that is produced in this country, every produce that is produced in this country, we have been able to pick it and give it to where it belongs. That is to the consumer for domestic use and also for industrial use. So it is a mixed fortune in the sense that you get a glut, and then that creates the impression that we have produced enough. And in the next 2-3 months, we have lost all that because we have not been able to store it and then plow it back when we need it most. And not only that, it creates cost for the producer.
But he's given us some examples. I mean, you talk about how it will be difficult to say whether or not the increase we've seen in the growth of some particular product is as a result of the policy, plantain for food and jobs. He talks about plantain. I mean, these are the 3 specific things he mentioned: plantain, rice, and tomatoes. Would you be able to confirm from your side, I mean, comparing the periods, whether or not we haven't seen very good yields as far as these are concerned?
For instance, the particular 2 crops that the president did indicate are highly perishable crops. For instance, plantain is highly perishable. Once it is ripe, within a short time, it will begin to get rotten. So we have not been able to improve the storage facility for plantain. So if we are of the view that we do not import plantain because we have produced enough, it's quite problematic.
Okay.
And plantain producers do suffer a lot of loss. Tomatoes, for instance, if you take the northern part of the country, which indeed has been the basket for tomato production, they have virtually moved away from it because there's no market for the tomatoes. When you say there's no market, you are simply saying that when they produce, what they're going to get as against the cost of production is very, very low. As I'm speaking with you, I'm up north here, and I'll tell you that you go to all the farms where they are not producing tomatoes. They are simply producing pepper because tomato has no market. So indeed, if you say we have not been importing tomatoes, that is difficult for some of us to agree with, particularly when you are looking at the situation on the ground.
So for you, going forward from that bit of the conversation, it's about addressing the issue of post-harvest losses, because of course we can grow them in the yields we expect, but as to whether or not it gets to the consumer, that's where the problem is.
Well, there are multiple of them, because what is the essence of production when it does not get to the consumer, or it does not get to the market? And we don't have a marketing system which is robust to be able to take all production that comes up.
So perhaps, sorry to jump in there, but perhaps it sounds to me like the part of the planting for food and jobs, if there's anything to go by, is that it doesn't necessarily address the transfer of the food products or the products we grow from the farm, from the farm gate to the consumer.
Yes, because I think that it has also been as a result of probably a misunderstanding of the agricultural system.
Okay.
Because we believe with the planting for food and jobs, the whole concept is focused on the fact that we have under production. So let's increase production. When you then increase production, then that production gets wasted. And we are all witnesses in 2019. We saw what happened with the rice when it was left in the open and it was exposed to the weather, and farmers had very serious loss. We are also aware about the tomato that we talk about, that if you go to other areas, you come to other areas like the Chima, you come to the northern part of the country, we often hear that there's so much glut of tomatoes. And because of that, farmers are running away from it. What I'm saying is that it's not just about what we think it is also about what is on the ground. And I'm saying that if you send your colleagues in the media to go come round and see, they have virtually abandoned tomato production in the northern part of the country because it does not pay to continue to be in tomato production. So I'm finding it very difficult to say if we do not import tomatoes, and yet all of us know that we eat a lot of tomatoes, and where does that tomatoes come from? It comes from Burkina Faso because they have got a very systematic production and marketing strategy which makes them, their farmers continue to be in production. In our case, it is not the case. So it's difficult to reconcile that we are producing enough of tomatoes, we don't import tomatoes, yet in actual fact, there's no tomatoes at all.
Would you agree with the statement then, generally perhaps, that we have seen a dramatic turnaround in our agriculture fortunes, as the president puts it? I mean, apart from the specific issues that you have raised, in general, would you agree with that statement that there has been a dramatic turnaround? Well,
there has been a growing recovery of agriculture. But as to whether one should consider that as dramatic, it's quite challenging, it's difficult. But you see, the awareness that has been created about planting for food and jobs, and people want to go in and so on, that is quite a good news. But you are also aware that it's not even only about the tomato and that he has talked about. If you look at maize, even now we don't have maize. Now, and we are now importing maize because we have not got enough, and the price is going up. So
we are importing maize at the moment, you say?
Come again?
You said we are importing maize. I just wanted to find out the extent to which we are. Is it, if you compare to what has happened in the past, how bad is this situation?
Well, I think that for the consumption generally, because population goes up and because urbanization goes up, consumption really goes up.
Okay.
And then in that case, it will be very sometimes simplistic to just pick this year and compare it with 5 years ago, when in the actual fact the circumstances are extremely different. The point I'm just making is that it is not a very good story to say that there's a dramatic turn, when in actual fact, just within this period, you've seen that there's no maize in the system. Where is the dramatic turn in the maize? And maize is one of the major areas for this planting for food and jobs.
Right.
So if maize is not doing well, and it has been the area that we have invested much of our resources, then we should be worried about it. And then again, we are not looking at how much we have spent so far. We also need to know, and I hope the president would have indicated to us, we have spent so much in the planting for food and jobs to produce so much quantity. Then it now allows us to see whether it is worth the expenditure we have made, given the output that we have gotten. But what we are only hearing is the output. But we are not looking at what input have we put there, how much fertilizer have we spent, how much chemicals have we spent, the total cost to be able to generate what the output that is put there for all of us to consume. So we maybe...
So we need to do some computation of the figures.
I mean, these are very short address. I believe the details may be there for us to look at going forward.
Okay. Another thing point he makes is that Ghana is now a net exporter of food. He talks about how our rice production has gone up and how we're doing very well when it comes to rice production. Your thoughts before we go?
Well, first and foremost, we have increased rice production, and then we have seen that, and that one is evident for all of us to see from 2019 to date.
Okay.
But we also know that our import of rice is still very, very high.
Okay.
It's still very, very high. And we are growing, we are improving on our domestic production, but we are not yet up to 50% of what we actually need as a country for domestic consumption. We are not yet up to 50% of the domestic demand being produced in this country. And you can go around the market and you see that most of the rice that we find and most of the rice that we eat is still imported. And this is the big challenge that we have not yet been able to overturn all these years. We are on the path, but that's what I'm saying, that to say it has made a dramatic turn becomes difficult for some of us to share with.
Yeah.
But we are agreed that we are making progress in our agricultural production.
This will be my final question to you. The president talked about improving the living standards of farmers. You had a group of peasant farmers. Is this something that resonates with them?
Well, improving the
living standards. The
living standard of farmers has a number of factors, and you can see that if you look at the Statistical Service report. Generally, those who are into real farming, food crop farming, they have a large proportion of those people being poor. So, but generally in Ghana, the poverty line is being dropped because there have been general improvement of the economy and the living standard of Ghanaians, which also even reflects in our living lifespan, which is also growing. But if we zero down to look at the farmers, we also need to categorize the farmers. Well, there are some farmers who are commercial farmers, but if you look at the smallholder farmers and those who are at the poverty line, we have not made significant progress in that respect.
Mr. Karu, I'd like to say a very big thanks for your time this afternoon. Hopefully, as we go along, one key point that you have made about assessing how much we have spent on this policy of planting for food and jobs and the outcomes of that expenditure. It's a very key point that you have made, and hopefully we'll be able to get to the bottom of it as we go along. Edward Karu heads the peasant farmers, not the peasant farmers, the General Agriculture Workers Union. Now, the president also hailed his administration's response to the COVID-19 pandemic, which he says has been replicated by the WHO.
The global pandemic of COVID-19 threatened to derail the progress chalked over the first 3 years of my administration. Its impact has led to the revision in GDP growth for 2020 from 6.8% to 0.9% and later to 1.9% to reflect significant slowdown in economic activities as a consequence of the effects of COVID-19 on lives and livelihoods. The proactive decisions taken by government to to fight the pandemic, as well as revitalize and transform the economy with the 100 billion CD Ghana Cares or Batampa program, anchors bright prospects for the medium term. Government will continue to implement prudent fiscal measures to quicken the pace of fiscal consolidation. And in March this year, the Minister for Finance will come to this august house to provide further details on the measures to be taken to restore our country back to the path of economic recovery.
And there's one thing that the president doesn't miss talking about, the peace accord signed in Dagbon. It was a major highlight, once again, of his address this time around.
I'm pleased to report that our undertaking to bring peace to Dagbon has been successful. For decades, this ancient and proud kingdom had been bedeviled with conflict. Since 2002, when a fresh eruption of the conflict ended in the tragic killing of my friend, the Yana Yakubu Andani, Dagbon had become designated as a troubled land. A generation of young people have grown up knowing nothing else but Dagbon as a troubled land where there was no peace, and public officials hesitated to accept postings there. On assumption of office, we decided to tackle the problem with renewed vigor. Luckily for all of us, the three eminent chiefs who had been at the helm of the peace process since 2002 did not relent on their commitment or enthusiasm for the cause of peace. Our efforts bore fruit. A historic settlement was reached, and peace has been restored to Dagbon. I recall the joy and deep satisfaction that I felt on the day that I attended in Yendi the inskinment of the new dignified Yana, Mahama Bukari II, and I carry my honorary title of Dagbon Malti Na Abudani, which he graciously bestowed on me with pride. I admit freely that it was one of the highlights of the past 4 years for me as President of the Republic.
Well, that's President Akufo-Addo, the highlight of his State of the Nation address today. I'm going to take a very quick break, but when we return, what are the reactions? What is the minority saying? Well, what did the majority also say? We'll hear all of that from my colleague Evan Spencer, who has been getting those reactions. When we return, do stay with us. Welcome back. So my colleague Evan Spencer, like I said, has been getting reactions from some of the members of parliament. Let's begin with the minority leader.
I'm now aspiring majority leader with Techima and Sefi to be secured. If that travesty of electoral injustice against the NDC is reversed as it should in the interest of justice and peace, we would form a majority. What I do know is that the 2020 election produced an inevitable outcome of no majority party in parliament. 137 is equal. So it's even wrong for the president to say almost equal. What is almost equal? It's 128 is almost equal. He got it mathematically wrong. But for the fact that they used state apparatus in collusion with the EC to deny Techima, it would have been interesting where the balance of power would be for Ghana. My worry is that the president was conspicuously quiet about the huge debt he's leaving for Ghana. The IMF projects a debt of 297 billion with interest payment, less principal and amortization to be 24 billion into 2021. And it means that the president too must accept responsibility that he has contributed to fracturing our democracy. Our democracy is not as it used to be 10 years ago. I mean, for the first time in our history, arising out of coalition of resource and declaration of resource, 8 lost lives, and he's silent on it. That is unacceptable. He must take responsibility. Those lives needn't be lost in a genuine, transparent, democratic process. He was dead silent on that, that's not acceptable. He must investigate it, punish people. They are interested in people who are protesting and rioting. They must
the state institutions, they've argued is doing it. The police are doing it. CID says they're looking into it.
They are doing what? So follow through. Those who shot and killed people are walking free. Is that the democracy you want? And then many of you in Ghana miss the point. You see, it's not about Techima South. It's about tomorrow. That in Tamale South, after resource, I just walk in and say, okay, Haruna Idris, 125,000, MPP 25,000, walk away. Ask the electoral officer, then I'm walking away. Is that the future of our democracy? So Techima South is to fight that systems must work, institutions must work, and they must work creditably and in accordance with law. Jean Mensah corrected herself 6 times. Did she go to court to correct herself? She used administrative processes and procedures. We simply ask for same. Use the same administrative processes and procedure to right your own wrongs. Then she says go to court because she knows it's tortuous and cumbersome and outcomes may not be today when they would have secured some decisions that they are undeserving. So my disappointment in Dagbang, the president says he's created Dagbang. The Yanna's authority and mandate have been questioned in many instances, including Nanton and Karaga. So the absence of war is not peace. He shouldn't think that all is well.
When the president says that the 8th Parliament demands that you build consensus, you think he's being sincere?
He is compelled to. That is not his wish. It's what the Ghanaian people impose on him, and he must respect it. He didn't win parliament, nothing more. He should respect the principle and notion and practical operation of the doctrine of separation of powers. He's an executive president. He lost parliament. He lost it. He's just forcing to add Techima and to add Sepsi, as you saw, and it's disappointing. Then cost of living and quality of life is deteriorating in Ghana. Read the Statistical Service and the UNDP report in Ghana, and he talks about Ghana exporting food. A bag of maize, as I heard from my mother for the first time, is now selling for more than 200 Ghana cedis in Tamale. That has never ever happened. A bag of corn. I use ordinary people to measure it. And then he prides himself with 1D, 1F. 1D, 1F not equitably distributed. Many other regions of Ghana, Upper West is lacking, Upper East is lacking, Savannah is lacking, Northern region is lacking. All the factories are concentrated in Accra and Tema. That is not equity. That is not equity. And then also, he's come to Parliament with a number of questionable tax exemptions, just giving away money to friends and family members in the name of tax exemption, in the name of 1D, 1F. My understanding of it was that 1D, 1F should contribute to job creation. And then the president again was dead silent on the growing unemployment in our country. Young men and women turning out of the universities, whether universities or polytechnics, are unemployed. What are we doing about it? You do youth employment and give people 100 Ghana cedis. NAPCO employees are not even on SNIT. NAPCO employees have no training, and after 1 or 2 months they have to get back home. That is not sustainable.
If you had to give a verdict on his assessment of the state of the nation, what would your verdict be?
I used to have enormous respect for Nana Akufo-Addo as somebody who held the rule of law, belief and faith in democracy, but his conduct in the 2020 election is disappointing. I mean, when President Mahama lost, he lost. He considered defeat. There's nothing like forcing to stay. That's why people are dying, because you are imposing yourself. And then every president gets it easy on the second term, but for him, what happened? With all the COVID money spent, we'll be investigating COVID, and the money they spend on election instead of spending it on COVID to protect life, on public health. They didn't spend the COVID money on public health. They were dishing it around and sharing it around men and women across the country to get vote. And the media, you must be interested in one of the most dangerous things Nana Addo has done to our democracy is the huge dosage of money he used in this election. Going forward, that will undermine the integrity of any democratic process, any competitive democratic process. It has never ever happened. Even at polling stations, people sharing money and putting money in masks for voters, and you think that that gives you a democracy? I'm sorry.
You had the Minority Leader Haruna Idris there, who says he's aspiring Majority Leader. Let's hear from Minority Chief Whip, who says It is disappointing that the president was silent on the killing of some Ghanaians at the just-ended polls.
Your reaction, you and the leadership of the minority, your reaction to the president?
Well, I believe that the president, usually this last session is brief, as he tried to. But I thought that he missed the opportunity to acknowledge the loss of lives during this election. I mean, this is something that has never happened. I mean, I can't remember the last election that we had people losing their lives in these numbers. And I thought that as the president of the country, should have taken the opportunity to acknowledge that. And that was a dent on our democracy, regardless of the circumstances. I mean, to get people shooting at collation center and people losing their life. But he missed that opportunity. And I also thought that he was being choosy, in my view. I mean, when you want to talk about the economy, you remember to go and take 4 years ago his State of the Nation. He was emphatic about the mounting debt that has been left him. I thought he should have told this country where the debt stands today, because he knows he has more than double what he came to meet. So he decided to be dodgy. And then when he talks about abundance of food, it's shocking, because I believe that the poultry farmers are listening. As you and I are speaking, they are importing maize into our country to be able to feed the birds. And it is well known, it's a fact. Nobody can hide from that. Go to the market now and see whether you are finding eggs. All those things are in short supply. This is reality. So when you are the president of the country and you come and you say this, the ordinary person on the street begin to to ask whether you are being truthful. I believe that the president, yes, he is supposed to be brief, he was brief, but I believe that when he also says the people of Ghana had spoken, they want us to work together. A simple ask, the election had been over for the past 3 weeks. What has he done, or his government had done, to reach out to the other side?
You've not been reached out to.
I can tell you emphatically, the parties have not reached out, even those of us in parliament. Nobody is talking. I mean, you could see what the majority that tried to generate. Caucus is different from the party with the larger number in parliament. And when we talk about the majority, go and look at standing order 7, 6 and 7. It clearly says it, especially at 7. No party had majority. After caucuses, it's people wanting to work with you. If you go and look at the Constitution, Article 97, G and H, it's very clear. When it's like CPP, if the gentleman was a CPP person, CPP at the national level can agree with MPP that, oh, we'll work together, and therefore he will join you. But in this case, for the independent candidate, the Constitution doesn't give him the opportunity to say that he's joining. He can only work with you. And in working with you, you cannot add that number to yours. You still stand at 137, and we've had that in Parliament, where you will see in caucus working, yes, the person will vote with you, he may sit with you, he will work with you. The person can even change his mind along the line, all those things. So you cannot use that as a basis to say that, oh, I have this. That is why you must start the talking now, so that we avoid the unnecessary confrontation when we get there. But I want to believe the posture of the majority leader is like, oh, okay, we are preparing our fighting gloves. So the minority or the opposition into the 8th Parliament will also just look for a glove and start preparing for a fight. I
mean, so stay with me, because that's important. It is a consensus building that the president has talked about a lot. We're just hearing the evidence there that there hasn't been any attempt to reach out to engender and nurture that consensus to the 8th Parliament.
I don't know who is to reach out to whom. The president is still the president of the 7th Parliament, I mean the previous one. He will be sworn in as the new president on 7 January. From that time, he will be a president under a new dispensation. In Parliament, the arrangement is the same. It is the 7th Parliament that is in session now. The 8th Parliament will start from 7th of January, or let's say, yes, 7th of January. Now, when it comes to consensus building, the Chief Whip knows that that is how Parliament has worked over the years. Even when the MPP had overwhelming majority, we knew that you cannot work without the minority. And that has always been our stance. So the difference is not in whether you're talking today or you talk tomorrow. The difference is in understanding that in Parliament, it has always been, even when we had to use appropriation, let's say The word is eluding me. When you have to make sure you have 106, so you're entitled to 6, I'm entitled to 10. That 6 and 10 must be respected. So today, the only difference is that you may have 9 plus 1. It won't change the way we do our business. It has never been the case, at least in the 3 terms that I've been in Parliament, that one has ridden rough shoulder over the other. Never. And the Chief Whip will admit that. When we can't agree, then we decide to vote. Where we need a 2/3 majority and we can't agree, it doesn't happen. Like the case of the attempted amendment of the Constitution. We tried everything to reach consensus in the House. When we couldn't reach consensus in the House, I advised the President to withdraw it. Because without reaching consensus, there's no way we could garner 2/3 of the votes we needed to amend.
I think he's making a bigger point. Yeah. The President acknowledges that this 8th Parliament that is about to sort of come into play, you need to build consensus. You need to reach out necessarily. But he's saying that in the process leading up to the birth of the 8th Parliament, there hasn't been any show of goodwill from the side of the President to engender, to nurture that into it at all. I mean, there has never. You have already gone ahead to say who your nominee is for Speaker, you know, and there's already threats I've heard about if they also put forward a candidate, then you're gonna. That doesn't engender that.
The threat started from their side. Who should speak to whom? They started, we will form a majority. We will elect our Speaker. We will elect the First Deputy. I have also seen on social media a list of people supposed to be from their side. That is what you have seen. That is all. Everybody appears to be working with information they pick on social media.
But you have confirmed yesterday, officially, that you are putting forward names, proposed names.
Yeah.
When that was happened without any sort of, because you know, in the end, it probably will have to come to a vote, and you need to build even around that. But you've already put out your choice, and there's no regard for what the minority says in that.
What does the minority say? They have also put out a name.
No, they haven't.
A name. I have seen.
The bundle of the names. I can say that started last week with people on social media bundling a number of names for MPP and NDC. But officially now you have a name. Yeah. But we don't. Officially we don't. Yeah. But that's what we are saying. But we've not spoken. Because, I mean, like he's saying, the arrangement to usher the 8th Parliament, there's a committee, for example, in Parliament, putting the place, how to do the swearing in, how to do that. But asking whether there's any for how are we going to relate to each other in 8th Parliament. There's none. And you could hear the posture of majority leader claiming, oh, they have majority. You heard him. So, and I'm saying that these are the comments that will not help us come around the same table. I can tell you, I spoke to Mr. Speaker, and I said, Mr. Speaker, yes, you are the Speaker of the 7th Parliament. I can assure you that I sit in at almost every level of our party hierarchy. There's no any talking. That is not good for our country. Yes, I don't have his decision to talk about this, but I told him, and he said, Mutaka, I agree with you. I will reach out. I will try to tell the party hierarchy about it. Because I believe that once the presidency, because look, the presidency that we are talking about, the president and the former president and the people around them, we are friends. In Parliament, he and I mean, we will travel and we will chat like 10 hours, not getting exhaustive of having something to talk about. The party hierarchy, you've seen after 2012 when they went to court, Dr. Kobneje moved us to their party headquarters to talk. I'm saying that they are not doing the same. Meaning that they are just preparing themselves like, oh, you to hell with you. And I keep saying that this parliament, the 8th Parliament, is going to be absolutely different. With that kind of posture, I can bet you they have a real run for their money.
Have you confirmed your names yet? Your own names, your leadership?
it will be done, I'm sure, this afternoon. There's a functional executive meeting that I believe may be able to finalize that and get it.
But I hear you're going to be maintained by Chief Whip.
I can't tell because, I mean, a lot of consultation is going on. What I have heard that I'll definitely remain as one of the persons in the leadership, as whether I remain as Chief Whip, which is my preference, but I can't tell until after the
Are you proposing a name for Speaker too?
Just after that meeting, because that meeting will now finalize.
What's the feeling among minority members?
Obviously, if those our colleagues who are in government are not talking, what do you expect? We just have to prepare. So in that preparation, obviously, you have to look at who you may want to put up for Speaker. Okay. Yes.
So this will come out as a secret vote?
Well, I mean, definitely when we get there.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You know, they are presenting it as if it is something starting today. The preparation towards we will form majority. We will forcibly take over the majority side. We will elect our Speaker and our First Deputy Speaker. Started from their side. And now today they are saying nobody is reaching out. Maybe at the party level they could. But as we speak now, I don't have the capacity. Who am I? I'm not elected to any position. I'm still the First Deputy Speaker of the 7th Parliament. So in what capacity would I speak to anybody about 8th Parliament? Right? But the truth of the matter is, the postures are the same, right? We have the numbers, we'll take it. We'll say, no, you don't have the numbers, you can't take it. In the end, it comes down to voting. So whichever of us, of the sides, can garner a majority, will choose what you want. I don't want us to start talking about, okay, give and take this, I take that, because in the end, then we are not going by voting. What is the practice? Our practice is that it is caucuses, and our orders are clear. The party or parties that form the majority is a majority caucus. So the party or parties.
But the independent can it be construed as a party?
Yes.
It's subject to interpretation.
Whose interpretation? You represent yourself. You represent yourself, so you're independent. You're a party in that sense.
I mean, yourself, you're still your first Deputy Speaker of Parliament. I mean, are you going to be maintained?
I believe so.
In the 8th Parliament?
In the end, it's voting.
Yes.
So if I get voted for, then I'll be maintained.
But there's an interesting question of the 2nd Deputy Speaker of Parliament, who must come from another party. Yeah. Is the party willing to play ball with the NDC on that?
Why not? That has been our practice. The only time that changed, because when NDC proposed a candidate for the Speaker, and then they said, if you do that, then we also propose a candidate for the 2nd Deputy. That's the only time that happened.
Okay, but you didn't, in this case, don't have a choice because the independent candidate is the only person you have in the 3rd place.
Well, if it becomes necessary, we'll put him there.
Thank you very much.
Jose Wusu and Muntaka Mubarak speaking to Evans Mensah there. Let's hear what Information Minister Kojo Oppong-Nkrumah had to say.
Firstly, within a 40 to 60-minute address, no human being will be able to touch on all the key issues that have transpired in the last 4 years of an administration. But I think the top priority items are the ones that the President has highlighted and as quickly as possible given an overview of how he believes they have panned out during his tenure. I agree with the majority leader when he says that we probably have to devise a mechanism that allows Parliament to interrogate these dusk addresses, because the truth is that they are done at a time when you really won't have an opportunity to debate it or to interrogate it. But it will go onto the record, but there should be an opportunity to interrogate it so that both sides of the divide can have a take at what they agree with and what they disagree with. But the President has performed his constitutional obligation. Yes, at the tail end, you saw, I believe, what ought not to have come into the 7th Parliament coming, i.e. both sides begin to posture on what the 8th Parliament looks like. And that then starts a controversy that is not needed for a day like this. For a day like this, we have fulfilled the constitutional obligation of accounting for the 4-year stewardship and giving a picture of what the state of the nation looks like today as His Excellency the President prepares to bow out from his first term. And what we should learn from it is perhaps to find an opportunity to interrogate or to discuss it in the future.
I mean, for you, I mean, of course, you are ushering yourself into the 8th Parliament. I guess you understand why everybody is anxious to see what the parliament. In fact, the president himself talks about how this next parliament is going to be any parliament we're used to. It's going to be different. Everybody's looking forward to it.
Absolutely. We are all looking forward to it. I think it will be a historic parliament. 137 with one independent candidate in the middle. And even we shouldn't be overly excited that he has announced that he will do business with us. He could change his mind somewhere down the line. It requires a lot of compromise and working together, consensus building. I think that's a clear message that the people of Ghana have sent to us in this election. The president has articulated that, and that is what we need to begin to work towards. I think anything that here and now begins to now put fetters in that space, we should avoid and explore how we can work together and not mar the beauty of what is going to happen in the 8th Parliament.
It's mixed feelings that greeted the president's delivery at the Abosokai spare parts dealership enclave here in Accra. Well, while some of the artisans commended the president's effort in his first term, others said the NPP government must move beyond the free SHS policy to invest in other sectors of the country. Some of them have been speaking to my colleague Manuel Krante.
There's any spot within the capital where the conversation is rife about the president's State of the Nation address, that's really got to be here. In fact, really varied opinions about what the president has been saying about the state of the economy and it being on the path to recovery. And some of the other interventions, which of course the NPP government has been rolling out in the past 4 years. Well, let me start here and then I'll walk into the yard a bit.
Things are not going well. As due to the conversation, we don't know how things are going well. So we are trying our best and see whether if it's good, then normal.
Of course, you've been here for the past 4 years in the Akufo-Addo government and you know the sort of things that he's been doing. If I ask you to rate him, for instance, the government and how it's been working, what would be your rating?
Oh no, and things are going wrongly. Things are not moving well at all. Things are going very slowly, yeah.
And what do you expect, for instance, the next 4 years to be like?
Oh, next 4 years, we expect better. We expect if it will be better for us. They will buy goods, they will buy our goods. We have sold well, maybe it will be good, yeah.
Great. So the economic indices as were, exposed by His Excellency the President in there, according to this man who just spoke to me, doesn't really show in their pocket. He says that, well, when they sell, people don't buy. One mantra which really now sounds like a broken record, we hear it all the time, and it's sometimes even difficult to know whether or not that is the real situation on the ground, but they are here and they say so. Let me speak to these people here. My boss, good afternoon.
Yes, sir.
I'm official Panso.
Welcome to you.
President Akasa, I say a minor a year 4 years, HME, Akufo-Addo Abano to me, I dear Ama. Omano sinina so na niama kra egu so a eye den etoto akwan mu wo krom no eto saying
me mom de anado amamu no koye because omo ye nyuma bebre within 4 years but na ho kire wo free SHS no beboa ma hofo bi eye free but still no na nkrofo scan wo mbotom ntisisi a no de na ehia ne se obetima ye esikasam no ho adwuma man ono ne ade a sia ehia amanfo pa because nkrofo complain say we ho a ne bako school na nso no okwadwuma na adwuma enye esa na na asa se de abaye man ne ni agibat na ni nyiyi
o mekase so far no President Nanado baye no wabɔ ne ho modern mfie na ye de man no wabɔ ne ho modern bae modern mo na wabɔ no mekase enwie peye because Ghana fo hia mo afri ne ho enti ne yeto abama no e ba free SHS o de aba eye nipa bebre nya ho mfaso because nenye nipa nyina na krache fo wo mu fie bae ne wo ye lucky a na oba dibuwa wa krache ni timi e ba wo fie se nkwala e ko school so aye mo bae sisi a no wonyere ne ho na 4 years ya san de amani ye de net na so a omo ne ho modern mo e besre ne se me how baako eya kra Kumasi road mesre no se kwan no de kufuo sha ase no ofura konwa so aban abakọ ba ye hunu hwe resrom so mo ye double na omo nye maye ye bo asi akwanhia no cause udu ba bi omo ye double na ye fa so no a hunu akwanhia wo ho mbo ba obesi sun re ni mu a kwanhyia ne nneɛma ɛkɔ so wɔ hɔ no enye
well, he makes the point that, well, he's to an extent satisfied by the efforts of the government in the past 4 years, except that he's expecting that some of these policies and programs which have been undertaken in the past 4 years are extended to some other areas. He mentions particularly road infrastructure and singles out the Accra-Kumasi highway, and he's talking about the dualization of that particular stretch to deal with the incessant, accidents that we see on the roads. Let me move to his colleague here. My boss, also joining in say, ono akase free SHS no na opese Accra Kumasi nkwan no so yenhwe na yenye na also what dey anything
menene adwene isan say me so me driver ni a menam kwan no so bi ntino kwan de way to ni na yehu so we see double lane no so na mbra pani kan na utumi call ma o feel comfortable by we see single lane no so a baby kura ho apotus no o say o doja answer o tumu a problem one fan to now doja so a we go meet another car no see a different problem ti esre na say ombo an was akwan no so
we better spare parts or
me pa chawan
you know better
me ba better tail light any mechanic senior maybe.
He also agrees with him and makes that point of dualization of the route. And you remember that in the 2020 budget, government elected the year 2020 to be the year of roads, and especially there were a lot of expectations along the lines of road infrastructure and development of SIM. Well, they're making a point that it needs to be taken seriously for these roads to be constructed. My boss, I'm seeing a whole lineup of a lot of people here who are waiting to join us in the conversation. You can't road, you can't free SHS. Now, also, what's the anything?
Oh, that's it. The say asanto aba amananado. Say enyuma awoye no. Once I met to us. Abanya bako. Bibre no maye, but in name ye pay. And this and there was some better in fear na. And Piebon say, the addition is no, am I? Wama say ye in Qualan be free street and so. O man or moton, show tongue, wine, Nina, so be a school. And no air depa. Name near Canada. O more than ye my.
Rebecca said, coronavirus by abiding share bebre and I took him. Ebine say you to two schools more. You say Nancy January 18 Nombeko school back. And now a month for bebre na say schools na ye two mono a hard drink pan a man cry no motif you know ref bebre and yamana almost no. What do my drink sir?
Yeah, say almost or two. So one to one ka e bia yale no e beku ye man. Was ube this school na say young monko school. Na omunkonko sua de but yale no so ekunkwala company for ekunska for enti sen ye bonkwala no ho ban a omo ne ye daache enti se school no tum de me des otum enti me de asda.
He makes a very emphatic point by supporting government's decision to close down the various educational institutions to the end of curbing the spread of the coronavirus disease as broke out in Ghana earlier in March 2020. For him, that was a close judgment call which was made to, keep their students, their wards safe. It makes the point that without the closure of the schools, possibly the virus would have infected a lot of their kids who perhaps would have lost their lives. But on what can be, say, coronavirus on a bang, na went to two schools mukra de ananka ebiana nyamempengo na nkra no bebre na ebe free also ne adwesa
menene adwen pa every say enka school no wan cross down enka de nsem bebre beba se mehwe SS no kra ye bieye wona na ekotro wona final exams no ye bie wona se wona ko school mo no ye nim yale bebre a ekokosi school mo ho eno sa senka awofo ni bi eko school mo ho akwakofa woni mabafie so abano ebo ne ho moden ekozi se obo woni ho ban e save woni school mo ho yale no antimi antretre wo school mo ho enti se nka obie ye nyina agumu ese enka ye school for no fiti denase to SS no enko school no a enka minimum kasatem de enka o ma no enka ye da form wo ye nan pa ba nana wa ya de say school no otimi close ne down e ma say niam ne ye afi ye close down ne we ye hwe corona ne ba ye no niam a wode tutu form e fa insuo sem no light sem no a eno so me man 100% wa ya de
100%. Well, he greets the president 100% in his dealing with the coronavirus pandemic, and agrees with the earlier speaker that indeed the government had handled the coronavirus pandemic quite well. In Brown China, said, and yama when abai Rebecca said, but Rebecca said, does it translate into your life? I mean, Osha was sitting in money and buying near all year.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity. My name is Apitis. Let's
speak English. If you're going to speak English, let's speak English then. Great. So essentially, what will be, your assessment of government interventions, policies, and programs, and how that's translate into your life?
Okay, I would say some of his policies, sometimes I don't agree with him.
Like which one?
For example, the time they decided to bring PDS and then a Japadi on board, we all knew the opposition came out to speak against it, and we all knew. I can see that sometimes the government is wasting our resources, because I don't know why you have to appoint over 120 ministers. And I'm expecting him to reduce taxes. If you travel to Gulf countries, they have road violations. They don't take taxes, but they make a lot of money from there. So I'm expecting government for us to get database, national database. Go to police stations. How many number of police stations do we have in Accra here? Go there. They arrest a number of shortro every day. They take money from them. And I ask myself, this money, where are they taking this money to? You see? So I am expecting the government to break something.
And that'll be all for this hour. There's more news at myjoyonline.com if you do log on, and I'll urge you to, and to also share the link with your friends. My name is Gifty Ando Apia. This video is still on demand on our YouTube channel. Many thanks for your time.